Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is a dear friend. He has been a law enforcement officer in California for almost 30 years. He has survived and he is retiring. He he was able to bring things to light that I had no idea about in the correctional system, and just hearing his perspective and what he's gone through, I have the utmost respect for the man, and I'm really honored to call him a dear friend, and I was so pleased to be able to sit down with him. It was a wonderful conversation. I know you'll enjoy it as well. So without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, my man, Marty. So speaking of cool physics, did you know the whole theory of relativity, which again, at least in part, that as you're traveling at a great speed, time slows down for you relative to somebody here. So on Earth, right? Like
Yes.
if you're on Earth and I get in some rocket and I'm going 20,000 miles an hour,
Yes.
time for me is much slower than it is for you.
Yes.
Right? And as we approach the speed of light, time comes to a standstill for the person observing it.
Yes.
Right. Now, that sounds very woo-woo for a lot of people. They're like, what? It's very hard to conceptualize a practical application. But check this out. Our cell phones, every single cell phone takes this into account because the satellites in space are moving at incredible rates of speed, and they have to adjust the satellite's time. It's not, if you start a timer, the satellites after one day or
It'll be
something
off.
like,
The
yeah,
time
they're
will be
off
off.
by a couple seconds a day.
Oh, so they actually need physicists
The
to
physicists-
actually set the time
yes.
to make up the difference.
That's right, because as the satellites move at incredible speeds relative to us, their time is actually going more slowly.
So have you heard the concept that time actually bends? That was something that I heard some physicists talk about. The time kind of bends.
You keep saying the word bend,
Yeah,
like
like
you're
it-
bending
it-
time. No, I haven't heard that. What do you mean?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna see if I can remember it. It's been a while since I did the physics. But like you were in an elevator and you're dropping, and
Okay.
you have a ball and you drop it. Gosh, I'm not gonna remember the exact details. I don't want to get off on a tangent because I don't remember, but I do remember
The
I'll
ball
have to relook
bouncing,
it.
the ball bouncing up and down. As you move forward, the ball appears to be moving farther and farther as it bounces up and down.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
don't
you're on a
remember the
train
details.
and you throw a ball up and down, and to the person standing next to the train, the ball appears to be flying through space at an incredible speed.
Well, I think what I mean by the time bending is because it's in a different. It's relative to where it is in space. So they're two different spots. So it's actually
Like arcing.
right because it this time here is different than this time.
Yes.
So time would
Yes.
actually bend.
Yes. So for the time for the satellite is totally different than the time here on Earth, and we
Yes.
have to account
Which
for
that
that.
is kind of weird.
No
How does time
kidding.
bend? Right? I mean, think about it. It's a time bending. And
Yeah.
that's another. Yeah, I'm fascinated with physics. Like I don't know. Like I had a friend of mine who had 2 doctorates in astrophysics. Like I don't know the mathematics and stuff like that, but the concepts of physics is just amazing.
And
you
the
know,
theories behind them, just like, hey, the satellite is actually younger. Like you have 2 twin satellites, they're born on the same day. One satellite gets shot into space and rotates around the Earth for 20 years and comes back. That satellite is distinctly younger than its brother, its twin brother, who never left Earth.
yes, yeah,
Right? Like,
No, that's yeah. I'm fascinated by it, and it's they figured it out by doing the math. What was the one thing what they were doing with the, and I think it was something to do with the whole bending of the light. And Einstein actually said that this should work, and I think it was a British physicist that actually was able to prove it. He was able to get a telescope and actually look at it and where it was in space, and it's just amazing. Einstein was incredible. I mean, just
a
incredible.
little freaky. Little
Yeah,
freaky.
yeah.
Little
It changed
out there.
everything. It changed everything, right? I mean, from Newton to Einstein, the way we see the world is just completely different. And then it makes you wonder, who's the next evolution? How are we gonna see the world differently? I mean, it would be hubris to think that, hey, we're here, right? We've got to the top, because that's probably what people thought in Newton's time. And then we had Einstein, who changed everything, and then it just kind of makes you kind of excited, maybe in some ways, for the future. Like, how are we going to see the world differently?
Well, that's incredibly optimistic, wouldn't you say? You're excited for the future. I mean,
Yeah.
first off, anybody who has their eyes open has to realize that today is not going to be tomorrow. I mean, first off, 10 years ago, We had just had our smartphones for like 4 or 5 years, and now look at it. Right, 20 years ago, nobody knew what a smartphone was. You had a phone that was like a brick.
Yeah,
so what is it in 10 years? Who knows?
No, I like to be optimistic. I think I'm relatively optimistic. I mean, why wouldn't we be, right? We've got pretty good lives. I mean, I'm not going down in the coal mine and digging and
No,
but
I don't
that
think terrifying to you?
It's terrifying
That we have we have great lives.
It's terrifying and it's so it's both at the same time. So the things like we're talking about, like the cell phones, like that's brought a lot of wonderful things. I mean, a computer in your hand, right? And you sit there and you can Google just about everything, right? But it's brought a lot of bad things too. I mean, it's technology is frightening, right? I mean, they're following you. That cell phone is a tracker everywhere you go. They know. Matter of fact, there was some woman. I was reading not too long ago that the phone was sending her stuff about being pregnant, and she didn't know. And then they discovered, oh, she's pregnant. It knew she was pregnant before she did. That's amazing, right? Because of what she was ordering or eating or her changing her diet or something. The phone picked it up, started sending her commercials on, baby stuff and this and that. And they're like, that's weird. God. Why am I getting this, right? That's horrifying. But at the same time, I mean, it's fascinating, right? I mean,
I definitely say it's fascinating.
So it's both. I don't think it's like, okay, it's like falling in love. If you fall in love with the right person, it's a good thing, right? It's positive. If you fall in love with the wrong person, and maybe that person doesn't love you, it could be a horrible experience, right?
Kind of like TikTok versus Instagram.
Oh gosh, yes. Now you're losing me.
Just the social media, apps.
Right. But yeah. So, but in and of itself is usually not good or bad. It can be both. Just like in anything. Like, I mean, cars are wonderful, right? They get us around, but they're dangerous. Tons of car accidents.
Right.
Probably the most dangerous thing we do is get in a car, right?
Right.
But I can imagine living without one. So,
Yeah, right.
So in and of itself, I don't see these things. It's what we do with them. But then that puts the responsibility back on us, which is horrifying.
Right. Here's something for you that you're probably the first person that I've talked to that has deeply considered the idea that we are all seeking distractions in the world, and we're just trying to distract ourselves from death. This is something you told me a while ago, and it really struck me. It was like, oh my God, it really is all just a distraction. Now, here's the issue that I'm seeing. We are becoming more and more engrossed with these amazing distractions, and it keeps coming up in my mind as something I should be really worried about. But I keep coming back to the thing you said, which is, look, all of this is just a distraction. It's all just some way to get our focus off of the idea that we're marching towards our inevitable doom. So is it true that we really have more or less valuable distractions? Like somebody who spends his or her life just messing around on social media compared to somebody who spends life like Mother Teresa and helping people or whatever saint you want to say. Is there a qualitative difference there?
I think that would be like relative to who you are, right? I mean, if you're a person who has maybe religious or even humanistic, then you would sit there and look at certain things and go, wow, that's really moral. That time is well spent. It's bettering humankind overall. Cultures, like compare cultures. That's one thing I know is kind of a no-no. Don't compare cultures because these cultures are this way and that way, but you can kind of compare them. I mean, you can compare education, you compare the way people raise their kids, whether they're polite or they're impolite. So depending on who you are, you look at these different things, you can sit there and go, okay, well, that's a better way. I appreciate it when kids are polite or
right.
Or, it's something that's appreciated. I can sit there and go, wow, that's really, those parents did a good job. That kid, really, he comes up and he says the right things and he really has a lot of respect. He's humble. He's just good to be around. That's something, right. A quality that you sit there and you say that's good. And I think that's a better quality for the community as a whole or for a culture. Not necessarily always. I mean, maybe Japan has a different culture of politeness, but I do think it's polite is a huge thing. So if you go back and you read something like the Iliad, one of the worst things you could do was be inhospitable. I mean, that
Right.
was like one of the biggest sins is like to be rude.
Right.
Right. And I still, if you think about it, maybe that's still, even to this day, is something that's important. We really went on a rabbit trail on that, but
No. Here's the thing. I think what you're touching on is essentially that there is value in having a set type of behavior that leads to a more functional and how would you say, just functional and healthy community, right? Because being polite, if you're just one person in the middle of the woods, is meaningless, right? But being polite in a community of 10,000 where you can have seamless social interactions that don't disturb the water, right? You can keep flowing. Community flows, community works. It's no big deal. Having that lessens human drama and turmoil, right? Having a community that can function effectively on the 10, like if you have 10,000 people, how many person-to-person interactions, outside of COVID times, of course, do you have? Just like, it's like 100, 200, a million a day.
no, you're right. I think the COVID thing is that kind of hit the nail on the head, and I do think it's kind of hurt us, like communities, the world's suffering from this COVID thing. And I was listening to this thing that was talking about how the mind works and what's a healthy mind or a healthy person. And believe it or not, they were saying people who win the lottery, they're happy for a short time. Let's say they win this $1 million or whatever it is, and they did the studies, and usually they go back to what they were. Like if they were, I hate to say, but they were a miserable person, they're happy for maybe a year and a half. They go out, they spend all this money, and then after the honeymoon time's over, they kind of go back to whoever they were. They were depressed. But if they were a happy person or had certain ideals, and they say a lot of that's social. They actually say that makes people happiest is when they're giving, which is crazy, right? Because that's kind of, it's almost like you have the scientific community getting to the top of the hill and the theologians sitting up there going, yeah, duh, I told you guys, giving to others and helping others is where you find happiness. And they actually find that actually people who do that or interact and give, one of the examples he gave was the Dickens story. You got to help me here. Was it Pittywig or whatever?
Tiny Tim?
Pittywig or whatever. The one who owned he owned where he was happy because they had the dance.
Okay.
Pickwig or something like that. Well, they said that's actually a good example.
Like Pickwicks or something.
Not the Pickwick Papers. It was in Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, and it was the part where Pittywig or whatever, the first boss he had.
Sure.
And they had the party and everybody's dancing. And he told them to stop working. He goes, it's more important that we have fun. You guys worked hard. We need to interact and have. And they said that was a good example of people interacting, and people were the happiest. It wasn't the success or getting to the top of the ladder. It was the social interaction and doing good to others that actually makes people happy, which is ironic, right? You give to others and you help others, which is really, I mean, it's biblical. I think in most world religions you would find that. And it actually shows that actually makes people more fulfilled and happy.
Right.
So maybe that's a good way to, what do you call it, divert ourselves?
Yeah.
So maybe the
Distract.
Mother Teresa thing is really, on even a scientific level, not even a theological level, actually something there, which I find fascinating, right? I mean, isn't that amazing? Somebody who does devote their life, maybe they're the happiest people.
Right.
And, we've got it wrong. When we're sitting there thinking, okay, let's get as much as we can. Let's get it, you're never happy. You got to get more. You got to get more. Well, you're never happy because there's always more to get.
Right.
But when you're satisfied by giving to others and you really feel the joy of giving of yourself and helping others, then that's actually, isn't that what it's reciprocal? And you
Right.
find joy and you actually find contentment. They find the most happiest people are those people that do that. So I found that fascinating. I don't know. Something I read not too long ago. So
Yeah, the concept that you can't buy happiness, that's actually not entirely true. And to your point, here's the thing: if you give somebody $100 and you say, this was actually a very interesting study, they gave these individuals $100 and they told one Group A, they're like, look, Group A, you go out, you buy yourself, you do yourself right, buy yourself $100 worth of whatever, and you're going to record your happiness before you do it and after you do it. Okay, they gave Group B $100 and said, go out and buy whatever you want, you can't buy it for yourself. And so they had to give things to people in the amount of $100. And they found overwhelmingly the people that had purchased things for other people were far happier at the end of the day. They had a distinct
find
increase.
that amazing. And
Yes.
I couldn't even really tell you why. I find it amazing, but it's just,
Well, think about it. Look, individually, if we're in the African savannah. And we're happiest when we're being most selfish in our actions, right? I'm getting food only for myself. I'm getting water only for myself. If we were happiest then, there would be no incentive or no fundamental drive for us to unify and help each other, right? The glorious example, or excuse me, the scene from Forrest Gump when he's pulling people out, right? And Lieutenant Dan's dying.
Oh, yes,
and
yes,
he's like,
yes.
just leave me, because his ultimate life event that he had anticipated was giving his entire life for his country and for his men, because his granddad had died in a war, his dad had died in a war, and this was his turn. And he was furious with Forrest. He's like, you robbed me of that.
You know what fascinates me is that's true, but it's true on two levels. Like, it's true on the front, like if you're a spiritual person, you go, you know what, I believe in a higher being, and that I believe that this is my destiny to do certain things, to be a good person, and therefore I would give myself. But if you also just believe in the chemicals in your brain, like the survival mechanism of evolution, it's amazing to me that they parallel. They're actually the same thing. I just find it fascinating. I mean, they're two different ways of coming at something, two completely opposite ways of coming at it, but it's actually the same thing in the end. I found that fascinating. The more I find that out, I'm like, wow, it's just so weird that it would be the same thing. But in the end,
isn't that kind of the interesting relationship we have now with the ancient wisdoms? And pick any religion has stood the test of time, right? You look at those, and they are this distilled knowledge, and essentially like a playbook for the best living practices. And you have distinctions here and there, don't eat this or don't do that.
Sure.
But the bottom line is, they're at the core these little manuals on, hey, this is how you're going to function the best. And coming at it with a scientific perspective, people have started trying to dissect them, not for the letter of it, which is like, there was a bear that chased this guy and the bear was talking to him, like, how ridiculous is this? But more going after the spirit of what the rule books were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And they find, obviously, not surprisingly, that there, like you're saying, there are these parallels with biology and what these guidebooks are saying that didn't have access to any of the technology. It's an amazing thing.
It's an amazing thing. I guess it shouldn't be so. It should make sense, right? I mean, it obviously, in a way, it should be that way. But I think that's optimistic, if that makes sense. Like, I could say and sit there, and there would be something where you would say, no, it doesn't really work that way. Somehow it's true. You remember I was telling you about the myth, like the myths, and I don't mean myths in the fact that a myth is not true, but a myth in that it's a story. And even if it's not necessarily that the myth has a good influence on people, individuals, or society, I think that's a positive thing. Like we were talking about, like I forgot his name who actually wrote it, but it was the ones about Washington Irving. He wrote the stories about George Washington chopping down the cherry tree, and certain things like that. And it was, nobody thinks he really chopped down the cherry tree, but they were myths that thought, okay, it's good to be honest. I didn't like the one about Columbus thinking that the world is flat. That was silly. I don't think that helped anybody, right? I mean, that just
I don't think that helped anybody.
Well, it wasn't true. I mean, nobody thought that. Columbus didn't think that, and that was one that for some reason floated around forever. That Columbus thought they were going to fall off the edge of the world, and everybody at that time knew that he got it wrong on how big the world was. He thought it was much smaller. He thought he got to India and the world was much smaller. The world was much larger than he thought. But he didn't think that it was flat. It was just such a weird thing. And so that was a bad myth. I don't know what that did.
I went off hard on the so our friend Ralph, right? He works in this big tech company.
Yes, yeah.
And he said Happy Thanksgiving to somebody. And they were like, whoa, bro, what are you doing? And we're like, I'm saying happy Thanksgiving, have a great Thanksgiving. They're like, whoa, do you know what you're doing? So company-wide, they sent around this article that was all about dispelling the myth of Thanksgiving, that these savages willingly relinquished their land to the more noble and intelligent Europeans that were going to usher in this superior society. And he sent it to me and was like, I'd never heard that story,
No,
but that the underlying idea is that the savages, right, the Native Americans had, just realized that there was a superior blah blah blah. And so we can't say Happy Thanksgiving. And it's like, dude, you have missed.
It's
We are not
ridiculous.
celebrating the actual mechanics of that exchange. Like, yeah, we have turkey and we have mashed potatoes and we learn about cornucopias in kindergarten.
Yes.
But what we're celebrating is the idea, the myth
Yes.
of people coming together and giving thanks. Just like we celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever it is. It's like when you break those all down, we're not celebrating the actual idea. Like, how are you telling me that Santa Claus has anything actually to do with baby Jesus?
No.
Right, being born. Or,
No, right. It's
and any of these
sells a lot.
ideas. It
No,
sells a
but
lot.
I
So do
think
diamonds.
no, but I think that it's I think that it's a yes and no thing with that as well, because I do think that you're right. There's truth behind it. Like the Thanksgiving story has a lot of truth behind it. But I think you should show the warts. Who was it?
What do you mean show the warts?
Show the warts. Like I don't think that you should. So, for instance, we have we're extremist. Human beings are extremist, and that's why we have such splits in our political systems. You have Democrats and Republicans, and far right and far left, or you have people that just go to extremes. We can't do things. We're not tempered or moderate, and that's funny because a lot of the philosophers say that you need to be somewhat moderate. You need to know yourself. Don't think yourself too amazing, right? Because that's hubris. But don't put yourself, don't be so humble where that's not true. Oh, I'm lowly and, I'm not this and I'm not that. Well, you are who you are. So, see yourself in a moderate way. Know thyself. That was the Greek thing. But going to these extremes, when we want to talk about Thanksgiving, we should tell the whole truth. There were bad things that happened. There were good things that happened. Overall, they were thankful because they should talk about how they were leaving the persecution of where they were going, freedom of religion. There were fights with the Indians, but there were good times with the Indians. It was tell it for what it was. But when you're telling about people being thankful for being able to eat because they got to they survived a winter, and they lost a lot of people. So it wasn't. They learned to be thankful in very difficult times, and I think that's not even myth. That's actually true, and that's something that we can embrace.
The thing that gets me, what you just said, we should tell the whole truth. I think this is an infinite rabbit hole that society in general is getting sucked down into, because there are so many levels to truth and perspective that we're starting to understand. And what's very interesting is we're starting to value the very small perspective over the larger perspective, right? Like I read earlier in the election, I read an article from somebody saying, hey, look, for once, the Democratic convention or some Democratic debate was dominated by women and men of color. Mm-hmm. And that's good because they are better leaders because they have a different perspective. And I was thinking about that. It was like, okay, they're better leaders because they have a perspective that few people have. And it was interesting. It was like, well, do they have the perspective that the majority has? Now, again, I'm not trying to qualify anyone's ability as a leader because of their skin color or gender. I think that's foolish. But when I read this article, it gave me pause. It was like, well, if you're in a society that's, let's just say, 98% purple, okay, and 2% of the society is green. By that logic, it's kind of like, well, we want a green leader because that green leader brings a perspective that few people have. And you go down this rabbit hole of like, we want the truth, but we want the whole truth. And to get the whole truth, we have to dive into these marginal or marginalized or periphery views so that we can get the whole truth. It's not good enough to have the 98 truth. Yeah, we need to have the other truth as well.
I think as human beings, and I'm sure we all suffer from, we have like a tunnel vision, and maybe we do have to go over a little ways, like you said, like this small percentage, we put them in that spot, so maybe it broadens us as a society. But at the same time, I think we need to be careful because. If it's a collage, you should bring all the best aspects of that. It may not necessarily have all the best aspects, and it may not be the best for everything. So, but we have a really hard time with that. Like right now, well, I can speak. I'm getting close to retirement. I've done it for coming up on 27 years.
Hey, thank you for your service keeping the state safe. Here's to you, Marty.
I've done my best. Thanks.
Here's to you. You've been in the correctional system for 27 years?
I started out in the prison systems, and I worked in the most violent prisons. I worked on death row for a long time. Came out, I was a parole agent dealing with a lot of the criminals, and then I did apprehension where I hunted the bad guys that were out committing crimes and hurting people. I was my job was to find them because they were on the run and put them back into custody and have them serve their time. And I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the excitement, the guns, the cops and robbers stuff. I mean, it's a lot of fun. Completely enjoyed it. But going to the whole thing with the law enforcement, the pendulum, it swings so much. For instance, since I went into law enforcement, it was like it was kind of a lot of knuckle draggers, and that's why we're getting the repercussions of it. So 27 years ago, you were seeing a lot of beat them up, ask questions later. They got it coming because they ran. They deserve this. Type of it was a different mentality, and some of it. This is going to confuse a lot of people. Some of it actually made sense, and I'd have to really go into elaborate why some of it made sense, and some of it was wrong. And what we're seeing now is the pendulum has swung so far to the other way that they've kind of they've handicapped law enforcement. So what I'm seeing now as I'm leaving law enforcement, I'm seeing a lot of the corrections that needed to be corrected, like a lot of the abuses that needed to be taken care of and get taken out of law enforcement. So I saw a lot of people I worked with get fired, and they should have. They couldn't, they were brutes, and they didn't know what to do with the power that they were given. Because when you're in law enforcement, you're given authority, you're given power, and with that takes a lot of responsibility. And I think, unfortunately, in the past, people have abused that responsibility to where now the repercussions are they've handicapped law enforcement to where criminals are doing things that they really shouldn't. I'm seeing things done I work in Oakland mostly, and I'm just seeing lawlessness. I'm just seeing things happen, people being hurt, things being vandalized, crimes being done, people doing really bad things with no repercussions. And
what do you mean no repercussions? Explain that.
So, for instance, if I've got a felon who gets out and he's killed people, he's literally taken people's lives, and he's done a certain amount of time in custody, but he gets out. He hasn't done a lot of time because now they're trying to get everybody out of prison. I mean,
what do you mean they're trying to get everybody out of prison?
Well, it's weird because they'll sit there and they go, we need to lower the prison systems because there was a big medical thing and they were saying this and that. And I've worked.
Are you talking about like with COVID? They're trying to
no,
decrease...
not even the COVID. It was something that was because of the cost. Prisons cost a lot of money. You're actually taking criminals off the street and then you're
housing them, feeding them, medical attention.
And prisons are actually cities. They're confined cities. I mean, they're ran like cities. There's a whole system to the way a prison works. I mean, these guys get up, they have jobs. There's ones that go and they make things. They work in factories. They make the food. They transport things. I mean, they're literally, the way they're ran is cities. They're cities of people who are convicted of crimes that were taken off the street because they did bad things, and they run as cities within that. And there's actually lockups within prisons. Like if you commit crimes within the prison or you kill somebody in prison, you get confined to a prison within the prison or a jail within the prison.
Sure.
It's crazy, but it's its own system. But a lot of people, they had tough on crime, and so a lot of the people that they did let out were people maybe, that probably maybe shouldn't have gotten out, and they did a lot to try to remedy that and get a lot of these people out. And I will say, even some of the ones, and I've known the most heinous crimes. I mean, and without going into any detail or grotesque stuff, even stuff that you've seen on TV, like Hannibal Lecter and stuff, won't compare to the real things that people do. I mean, some of the people who've done just incredibly horrible things. I mean,
like beyond, we're talking about Silence of the Lamb, right? Like
beyond.
You're talking about like beyond eating somebody's kidney with some fava beans.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't want to elaborate, to be honest with you.
You're fine. I'm not asking you.
No, because some of it. But so just take my word for it. So some of these people shouldn't get out, and there's a lot of people that are doing pretty heinous things. But they're letting a lot of violent people out because the push has been to let so many people out to save costs, and it does save costs within the state. But the cost is going to be pushed out into the public when these people commit crimes, because some of these people are going to commit crimes. The recidivism is still pretty high, and some people, well, for instance, I take this guy out. This isn't a real bad one. This isn't a horrible story, but this guy was, and I'm going to say his name. His name's Randy Kraft. People can look him up. He's an old man, and we used to take him out. I would have to take him out. We'd get the SWAT team. The SWAT team would take him out because he was high risk. He was a real Hannibal Lecter. He killed over 65 young men, and he was down in San Onofre. And what he would do is he would drive there, and the young Marines and stuff. He would pick them up. He'd say, "Hey, you need a ride?" You know, guy would get in the car with him, and
a Marine. He'd pick up a Marine.
Let's say a Marine. He'd pick him up. He'd say, "Hey, you know, I got you want to finish this beer for me? And you know, I'm going to break open another one." Anyways, he put a drug in there, completely paralyze them, but they would be awake, and he would do all kinds of unimaginable, heinous things to them, and eventually killed them. So he did over 65 of these murders, and he's on death row. This is the guy we're taking out. So this man,
when you say taken out, does that mean you're going to find him, or
no, we're taking him out. So he's in the prison, San Quentin. He's on death row, and we would take him out for medical stuff because these guys have their rights to get the best medical care on our taxpayers' dollars. I'm not opposed to that, but when we would take them out, we needed to make sure that this guy was not going to get away.
Sure.
This guy is going to kill people.
Sure.
He's Hannibal Lecter. He's not. The strange thing is, and this is probably, and I tell people this story, this is kind of sidetracked to what we mostly talk about, but he was kind of like Mr. Rogers. And so I don't know if like if you're familiar with the Night Stalker. It's kind of been a while now, so the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez,
not so much.
and I'm trying to think of ones. The reason I mentioned him, and you could look him up as well, is he was a scary guy. Like he was a creepy devil worshiper type scary. He's the guy you expect.
Okay.
Your hair in the back of your neck kind of raises up. But this guy, this Randy Kraft, he was like Mr. Rogers. I would go up to his cell and we'd have long talks, and I'd forget he was a murderer. That guy scared me because you don't think Mr. Rogers is gonna kill you, right? So it's kind of a freaky thing, right? But anyways, we would take him out, and we'd take him to San Francisco, and, San Francisco General. And
if I may, I don't mean to interrupt. What would you talk about?
we would just talk like how me and you were talking. He was very intelligent. His IQ was really high. He wasn't a stupid person. I mean, I forget his IQ, but it was well. In other words, he was smarter than the average person. He had a really high IQ. Matter of fact, I think he might have been a doctor or something. He was a really smart guy. So you would forget.
Did you ever, and you likely didn't ask, but did you ever find out what was his like breaking point where he just went completely bonkers?
No. So this is, and I'm a lay person, but this, I think with somebody like that, I really think it's a sexual thing. And I don't mean it's physically sexual, but it's mentally sexual to them.
Like it's arousing.
It's arousing.
Right, like Tyson said.
So
Tyson said in an interview that he gets aroused when he got into boxing.
Yes. So it's something that is such a strong pull that literally gets him off in a way. That, I mean, obviously he killed 65 people. I think that this is probably his. So I don't know if you need to ask somebody like that. I mean, that's an obvious, if that makes sense. Like if he had only killed maybe one or two people, you'd say, hey, what happened? But I mean, this is something. This is a pattern. This guy literally, got off. And I think was it Bundy? Was it? I forget the guy in Florida. And he actually talked about it. He talked about how it was a sexual thing and it progressed to where he murdered people and he would get off on it. And so he kind of discussed that for people that are interested in that stuff. But anyways, just to let you know, it'd be weird. I'd take him out, and people would be like, "Why are there so many of you? We see you guys kind of all around this guy. And he's such a sweet old man."
And you're talking about taking him to like San Francisco General Hospital.
Oh yeah. And I remember I had a nurse. She'd come up to me and she goes, "Hey, why do you guys? Usually there's only a couple of you guys. Why I can see a lot of you guys are here and this and that. And we're not allowed to say." I said, "You got his name, right? You can look him up. You can look him up." But I mean, he literally was. Hannibal Lecter. He really was. He's the living Hannibal Lecter. So yeah.
And you were hanging out with him.
Yeah. And this, like a scary thing is, a very intelligent person. Like he could sit here. If he was sitting here, he could carry on these conversations that we're having right now and have no problem keeping up with this. I mean, so evil has nothing to do with intelligence. It just sometimes it just is. Yeah.
You told me a story once about having a dog. You were chasing down a guy, and you knew the guy was in the house and he wasn't coming out, and it was like not coming out, and he was like up on the roof or something, just waiting. So you had your dog, and you're like, look, we're gonna let the dog go, and like I'm giving you 2 minutes to come out or something.
Yeah.
Guy doesn't come out, and you let the dog go.
Let the
and
dog go.
It's just like
Yeah.
10 seconds later. Oh, get ah!
Yeah. Yeah.
So you told me that when you took the guy to the hospital, because he was getting his forearm bandaged up for the dog, and you asked him, at least this is what I recall you telling me, you were like, look, why don't you just come out?
Yeah. He was caught.
He was got. And
The game was over.
He was like, we had you. Why don't you come out? And he's like, well, I kind of wanted to give you a hard time. I just wanted to make it
Excuse
hard
my
for
French,
you.
but he goes, I just wanted to fuck with you guys.
Right.
That's what he said. It was his birthday, and he just wanted to fuck with us.
Right.
He was honest.
This is the most remarkable thing about the story. After he said, I just wanted to fuck with you, you're like, well, then it worked out for all of us.
Yeah, there was no hard feelings. You know what?
And that's my point. It was like the humanity you showed that guy. It's like he was obviously a criminal who you're hunting. He's getting bandaged up. You're not tough talking him, giving him a hard time. You're like, look, it worked out. Happy birthday.
See,
we
no,
got you. You gave us a hard time. We all win.
It's kind of a strange thing because, you have to get in everybody's shoes. This guy's obviously a criminal. He's a career criminal. I don't know all the circumstances, and I don't want to make excuses. I think if you can always keep justifying. Then you can even justify Randy Kraft, right? He can't help it. It's a sexual arousal. He can't help it. So you can justify anything. So I think we got to be careful in justifying it. Or at least we might be able to go, okay, we can feel for the guy, but it doesn't mean you're not punitive, right? I mean, you have to, for society to be, well, let's put it this way. If my hand's got gangrene and it's going to kill me, right? I need to cut it off. I want my hand. It's not my hand's fault, but it's going to kill me, right? I need to cut the hand off. So if there's something in society that needs to be dealt with, but this guy, he was a criminal. I had no harsh feelings with him. It was kind of like the Bugs Bunny. I don't know if or the Roadrunner. You see the wolf and the sheepdog, and they go in, they do the punch in the time clock, and as they're punching in, he goes, hey, how are you doing, Ralph? And he's like, I'm doing good, and punching the time clock, and they go about what they do, right? And then at the end of the day, they punch in the time clock. Oh, how's the family? How's this? There's no. It's not personal.
I remember that.
Yeah,
they were like, I'm going to punch it in. I'm going to chase you all day.
That is exactly how it is. And when I was chasing a lot of the criminals, that was exactly how it was. It sounds strange, but there was no animosity. Not with, there's different kinds. There's some that, there's always the ones that I can't wrap my mind around. Ones that hurt children or child molesters or rapists. I can't do that. That's not okay. I don't know if that makes sense.
There's a level of dehumanization. When
yes,
you see,
and this is a strange thing too.
Like
even
that.
within the prison system, they've done a lot to change this. They have all these PC protective custody yards. But back when I was working in the prison system, if you came in and let's say you're Hispanic, right? You're a Serrano, Mexican mafia. So whenever a new guy would come on in the yard, they'd ask to see his papers. They'd treat him good. Hey, buddy, how are you doing? Do you need anything? We got this for you. You got zooms and whams, cookies and food or whatever we're hooking you up. You need some smokes, whatever. Hey, let's see your paperwork. So if you produce your paperwork and you're a robber, or even if you killed somebody in gang violence, whatever, that's business, right? Kind of like the mafia, the old mafia movies. It's not personal, it's business, right?
Right.
That's fine. If you're a rapist, you're a child molester, you weren't walking that yard, you were going to get shanked. They're going to stick you. And even in prison, they have a morality. And you'd ask them, I'd say, hey, you guys are all in prison. What's
the difference?
And they say, you know what? We have moms, we have sisters, we have daughters. So even in the prison system, in that city, like I was explaining before, there's a morality, even in there, which is, I don't know, I guess it shouldn't be strange. But so anyways, in that kind of cases, I have a certain level. But with other guys that, I don't know, I'm not saying that it's okay, but I guess I could understand it. I think, so this is another thing too. So there's the difference between people who are wolves and sheepdogs. And there's a Lieutenant Grossman, I don't know if I mentioned him before. He wrote a whole thing on it. So people who protect society and the people who a lot of times are the vicious ones, like the wolves that hurt society, there's not a lot of differences. It's kind of how they transfer what they do. So for instance, maybe I could have been a criminal or a wolf and hurt people and done things with
you have a
the
certain
violence.
skill set.
But to transfer that and use that for good, to go out and protect society. And that's why I think a lot of times the average person has a lot of hard times with law enforcement. Fuck the pigs. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Screw the pigs. But a lot of times I think the average person can't tell the difference between a sheepdog and a wolf, because they both have long teeth, right? They're both kind of vicious, and they look at them and they're like, I can't tell the difference. And unfortunately, because of things that have happened in the past, that kind of was blurred. But unfortunately, a lot of good sheepdogs out there, and right now the sheepdogs are having a really tough time. And I gotta be honest with you, it's a good time to get out, just because of the fact that you can't win. Right. It really is. Like, so for instance, I was hunting guys down, and I can't tell you how many times. For instance, we had this one guy, and I can't remember what he did. He probably killed some people or did something, and we had a connection that his girlfriend worked at the DMV. So I was set up in the car to where I had the rifle, and I was the first that was going to get out on him. He was going to drive up, and we had it set up to where if he took off running, and I think it was Redwood City. So we had their PD on the other side, and they were going to be able to throw the strips and hopefully flatten the tires if he took off. And we had some other people if he took off and jumped some fences. But I was going to be right there when he got out of the car and put the rifle on him. And so anyways, long story short, he's African American. He's a black guy. So, and this was before the whole thing got pretty crazy with the city's burning down and this and that. So anyways, he got lit up they were following him. They had the helicopter following him, and he didn't know, they're following him. And I'm getting on the radio. He's getting closer. He pulls up, and the girl gets out, and he kind of pops the door. He's talking to him, and I come out with the rifle, and the guy comes up and lights him up. And I get on him, and he's got a gun right in the center cancel. I can't see the gun, but the door opens, and I know all these guys. They've all got guns because that's what they do. That's their job, right? So I put the gun on him.
That's their job. This is your job.
Right.
That's his job.
I put the gun on him, and I'm F you. I'm basically, so it's really important when you do the job, you have to let the guy know that you're going to press him out. Does that make sense? You're gonna end everything for him if he makes a certain decision. It's his decision, but he has to know. Things like that can be very dangerous if he thinks that he's got a chance, or you're going to hesitate, or you're not going to do what you're going to do, because that's when he's going to reach for a gun, or he's going to run, or he's going to do it. He has to know that this is in game. That's the only safe way to do it. But anyways, in telling this story, come out, I put the rifle on him, F him, F you, I'm going to blow your head off, whatever. It's not nice talk, but he needs to know that this is going to happen. He looked at me, his eyes got real big. He knew the game was up. He crawled out of the car, was able to go over, put the cuffs on him. Done. My day's done for the day, right? We got the bad guy.
No incident.
Everything's good. The gun was right there, big old huge handgun, and let's just say he would have, after all this stuff that's going on right now, let's say he reached for that and I smoked him. Could you imagine what I would have to go through just because of his race? Could you imagine? And because they're not going, okay, they don't look at it right away. The news hits, this guy was shot, and he's got a family, and he's this and that, and his mother's weeping, and everybody's investigating me, and I got a lawyer up, and that's scary stuff. And I guarantee that's what it is right now for
what's
people. What's
terrifying, you have this experience, okay? So you tell me the whole story.
And I'm very biased, but this is the way I see it. So I'm being honest.
I'm not criticizing you at all. What I'm saying is you say, hey, look, there was a gun, right? I couldn't see the gun directly, but I knew there was a gun. And by the way, you were right. There in the center console.
I would have never shot him until he actually reached and I actually saw the gun. But I would have shot him.
Right. So the point is, I guarantee you there would have been some discussion ahead of time or right as soon as this happened, which is, did you see the gun? Or what point did you see the gun? How much time between you saw the gun and you fired and all of these things, which is, there's a level of understanding, like you're saying.
Okay.
This is this guy's job. There's a level of understanding and sensitivity that you have being in this job for almost 3 decades.
And I agree. And I'm not like your average law enforcement, because fortunately for me, I've had tons of experience. My only job was hunting bad guys. So I didn't go give traffic tickets and, go over and get a cat out of a tree. My only job was hunting the bad guys. So some of these cops, they don't do that. And then all of a sudden they're thrown in there with the bad guy. So I'm overtrained for that stuff, if that makes sense, because that was my only job.
You were specialized.
So I can see how a lot of mistakes, like for instance, I teach at the academy, and I'll have them in there, and we'll be talking about something that happened. Oh, the guy got shot. He turned around real quick, and he had a cell phone, and he got shot. And those are bad shoots. No justification in whatsoever, but it cost a lot of money. So the money that went into me for the training I got is a lot of money. You can't train. I mean, we're not going to be able to spend that much money on every law enforcement person? That's a lot of money.
Did you have ongoing training as well as the years went on?
No, I was constantly, but I was specialized in that training. So let's say let's say a beat cop. I would never get the training that I was able to get. And so all of a sudden I get a guy and he turns, you're chasing him, your adrenaline's pumped up, your heart's racing. This guy shot somebody, he never was convicted, but he's killed people, and you're chasing him and you're jumping fences and you're running, and he turns and he's got this shiny thing in it. You will actually, and you know this because your mind will see things. Your mind will actually see things. You'll see a gun. It's not a gun, it's a cell phone. You shoot the guy, and then everything. You shot a guy with a cell phone. The guy was unarmed. You shot him. That poor cop, and I'm not justifying it, but he really did see a gun. Because and the reason I know this is because I've done this in the academies. I will get him in there, and I hate to say it, but I'll get the biggest black guy that's in the academy going through there, and I'll put him in there, and I'll say, listen, I want you to go, and I'm gonna have you go into this dark room, and you're gonna turn, and you're gonna go like this with your phone. And I'll tell the guys, I'll go, listen, this guy's a really big guy. He's just beat up his girlfriend, and we know he's killed people. You're going in, you got to get him. You got to make the arrest. You go. So they go in there, and they're screaming at him, let me see your hands, let me see your hands. And the guy turns, and he's got this in his hand, almost to the T every time they shoot him. Every time. But they're new, right? So you get these officers out there, they're brand new, they don't know. Somebody like me, I'm not going to shoot him. But I've done it 1,000,000 times. But your average officer literally sees this.
Right.
He sees a gun. So anyways, I'm not justifying it, but I feel a lot of what's going on at that instance.
How do you not do the shooting? Like, how does that... What do you think when you see all of this?
So, for instance, for somebody who's specialized, you train them. Hands. Hands kill, right? So I'm not looking in your face. I'm not looking at your feet. I am actually looking at your hands. So I see the cell phone.
Sure.
I see it. I actually have my gun here. I see the cell phone. But
Sure.
if I see a gun, I shoot. Does that make sense? But if you're not trained for that, you're looking at the guy and all of a sudden something flies up and you see it flash. You literally see a gun. Anyways, to get on I don't want to get too much on a tangent there, but so when I knew that it was bad for law enforcement was the thing that I think was it Georgia? And this is an example because and I'm not trying to, I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying what I see, if that makes sense. But when I knew it was really bad is when the guy with the taser. So these two guys, this guy's drunk. He falls asleep at the, was it one of the drive-thrus? The cops are called because he's drunk and he's fallen asleep. The Wendy's or whatever it was called.
Speaking of, do you want some Bombay?
What is Bombay?
Gin.
Yeah, I have a little bit.
Okay. Hang on a sec. Here we go.
So the cops are called. They come, and they wake the guy up, and they say, hey, he's sitting in the car, the driver's seat.
Is he in the drive-through window?
He's in the drive-through window. He actually falls asleep. The cars can't get in, and that's why they're called. Because
that makes
stopped.
sense. Sure.
So they pull him out, and they're talking to the guy. And there's no disrespect. I see him talking to the guys like people do. They're talking to him. But he's obviously driving, right? And he's drunk.
Which is a no-no.
It's a no-no. And for my job, because I only have bad guys, I'd probably say, walk home. But for these guys, if you're in law enforcement, your job is to get somebody who's got a DUI. That's your job, right? I mean, you got MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. People are killed because of this. This is an important thing for regular cops. So they go, basically, they know he's driving. They're going to say, hey, you've been driving, you're drunk. And they're going to start giving him the test. Well, the guy doesn't want a DUI. He knows what time it is. He knows he's going to get in trouble. So they basically tell him, turn around, cuff up, because they've determined from their experience, and they know. I mean, it's even an average person would know, but a cop who sees this regularly, he knows
somebody
this guy's
passed out in the drive-through.
This is not
he's drunk. You're right.
Yeah. So, and they did a few things first. They asked him a few things, had him do a few things, just that are basically legal, so it would stand up in court to say, hey, this guy was drunk, and from these things is how I determined it. So anyways, the guy...
You mean the judge wouldn't accept? Your Honor, he passed out in the McDonald's drive-thru in his car. He was obviously drunk.
No, and I'll tell you why. Because, and it's funny, because if you had Jeff here, he would be like, well, the guy's working 4 jobs, and he's got 2 kids, and he fell asleep because he's just exhausted. I mean, there's things. So they have to do certain things to actually determine that it was alcohol.
Sure, and that's all fair.
And so that's coordinated and things like that. His coordination was off and this and that. His eyes dilated. Things like that to prove that he was high. So anyways, they determine this. And they're good at, that's what they do, so they know. And so they say, turn around and cuff it up. So he knows that this time there's no walk home or get in your car and leave. He knows
It's
that it's on. So
Right.
his demeanor changes because at that time he was completely okay and he was trying to talk his way out of it. So the fight was on. They basically start fighting. Don't blame him for fighting because that's what crooks do. Don't blame the cops for fighting back because that's their job. That's what they're supposed to do, protect society. One of the guys pulled a taser out because if you can tase somebody, game over. And they actually were giving him warnings. Hey, stop, I'm going to tase you. This is what you're supposed to do because you want to let the guy know. You don't want to just tase him. You want to let him know. I mean, right? We're going to tase you.
It's courteous.
And it's actually part of what we're trained to do. Believe it or not, we're not just going to tase somebody. You say, hey, we're going to tase you, and that way the person actually has a time to comply. This guy was in it for the whole thing. Okay, that's fine. And I think the guy actually tried to tase him, missed him, whatever. The fight goes on, and the bad guy's punching him, and he actually grabs the taser, and turns and takes off running. And as the cop's chasing him, he turns, he points the taser. Now, if you get hit with the taser, and I carried a taser, I've been hit with the taser, you are incapacitated. I mean, so it hurts for you. We call it taking a ride. You're just basically riding the white lightning. So in that, it's only seconds. I don't know if it's like even 30 seconds. Maybe not even. No, it's not even that long. It's like 10 seconds.
But you're done. Like you have no capacity.
Time. So we talked about relativity and how time is. So when you're getting tased, time. So this is the speed of the taser for sound. It goes. So when you're hearing it, as you're getting tased, you're hearing click. I literally, I kid you not, because it hurts so bad.
You're retiring in 10 days. I want you to tase me in the next 10 days just so I can.
Everybody should be tased at least once, but you believe me, you never want to be tased twice because it's just once you've had it's just horrible.
When did you get tased? Was this part of your training?
It's part of the training. So
they tase you as part of your training.
Well, because if you're going to tase somebody,
it's better than shooting.
Well, think about it. But right, that's some of the arguments I've had. People go, well, I didn't have to get shot, but they want you to know what it feels like because if you're going to tase another human being, they want you to know what you're putting that person through. And so it's funny because I've actually had people, and I've gone to in Oakland. I'm working in Oakland, and I'm in the hood, and I've had guys high as a kite, and the family's called me, and the guy's nuts, and he's fighting everybody, and I come up and I go, listen, I'm going to tase you, and I clicked it, and he hears it, and if he's been tased before, I don't give a crap how high he is. He'll turn around.
He sobers right up.
He sobers right up, and I would too because I can drink a lot of this and get really drunk. And if I heard that taser, I'm cuffing out. That thing hurts so bad. But anyways, this guy chose to fight, and he's fighting, and he turns and he actually points it at the officer and he shoots it. Now the officer shoots him and he kills him. Now, we were trained, and this is the part I knew when law enforcement was really in trouble. I'm a taser instructor. I'm a firearms instructor. I've done I actually teach other law enforcement guys the rules and how we do this. Now, we were always told that if a guy points a taser at you and he's going to shoot you, that is lethal. And the reason it's lethal is because
if they hit you in the head or the wrong spot.
It's not that. You're incapacitated. In other words, he hits you. He can walk over, take your gun, kill you. He can do whatever he wants to. You are a baby. You have no self-defense once he hits you with that taser.
For like 15 seconds.
Yeah, you're done. And so you are told that the guy's shooting a taser at you, you will shoot him. And that's what the cop did. The guy shot the taser, and he turned, and his reaction was to shoot the guy because it was to him, this guy hits me, I'm done. I'm fighting for my life. And he killed the guy. Well, then everything erupted, and the cop lost his job and went to jail. Now, all of us law enforcement throughout the United States are going, wait a minute. We were told within the parameters that we can work in that this was okay. None of us are safe. And that's when it hit me. I get it if you give me the rules. It's Jiu Jitsu, right? Where you're going to fight to win. There are certain rules, right? There are rules that you're gonna fight a world-class guy, right? And we agree to fight with these rules. Don't change the rules on us. We'll fight with these rules. Right in the middle of the thing, this guy changes the rules, and the ref's like, it's okay.
Right.
That's not okay. And that's what they did to law enforcement. They changed the rules right in the middle of the game, and it floored all of us.
Right.
We're like, wait a minute.
I'm only accepting this set amount of risk because every rule change changes my risk profile.
They changed the game right in the middle. Right in the middle of the game, they changed the rules on us. And so it horrified me. And I feel bad to tell you this. I know a lot of law enforcement. I work with every different law enforcement, especially when I was doing apprehension.
Sure.
They love working with me because we go hunt bad guys. FBI, all the local PDs, Sheriff's Department, everybody. Homeland Security. A lot of them, especially the local PDs and stuff, they're not doing anything. They're afraid to, which doesn't make society safe. Doesn't make society safe.
Okay, back up.
Anyways, sorry, I don't mean to be. That's kind of a downer, but it's true. It's true.
This is what I want to hear. When you're saying they're not doing anything, what do you mean? Because people talk about this like, oh, cops aren't doing anything, or they don't care, or the cops themselves are kind of their hands are tied. So give me some practical
this is the way I understand it. So when I took the job, and to this day, I've got less than 10 days left. I never, and I mean this all with all my heart, but it's not just me. Anybody in law enforcement, or at least they should, has no problem giving their life for their job, that for society, whatever. That's part of what you decide. But what you don't want to give up is you don't want to give up your kid's future. You don't want to give up your home. You don't want to give up your pension. Those are things that's not what you signed up for. Like, I go out and hunt one of these bad guys. I think I can turn, and this may sound crazy, but let's say that guy turned and shot and killed me. I really don't even have anything against him. He beat me to the draw. He got me. Whatever. That's the cops and robbers.
That's the game.
My family's going to be taken care of. People are going to look at me.
Marty, you are one of the nicest, kindest people I've ever met. I've known you for well over 10 years. How is it that you go to work every day with the attitude of, if somebody shoots me, that's the game we're playing, and you still manage to have this level of compassion and empathy and humanity in you?
This is going to sound kind of funny, but you learn it from the convicts. Believe it or not. So the young guys, some of the young guys, but believe it or not, the convicts in prison and stuff like that, they, like, from the mafia movies. This is kind of lowbrow, but I'll give you an example. So for instance, I knew these two guys that were cellies. They were Sureños. So the Sureños, the reason I mentioned them, there's a lot of gangs in prison and whatever, but the Sureños, usually the Mexican mafia usually ran most of the prisons from the south side. They have the numbers and they're very militant. Like their cells are clean, they're immaculate, they don't do anything without asking the shot callers whether they can do it. Anyways,
what's a shot caller?
So a shot caller is the one who, if it's on a yard or in a dorm, a building, he's the one that's got the keys to that yard. In other words, he's the one he's got the power. He's what's the head of the mafia? He's the godfather.
Yeah, okay.
He's the godfather of that unit or that yard or whatever it is. He's given the keys, and he's that guy. And he's usually been given it to, the system's changed. I've been out of the system for a while, but it used to be Pelican Bay. The top guy would be usually, they'd put him up in Pelican Bay and they'd know he was the top guy and he'd be isolated, but he was the one that was the very top guy. But it would kind of come down and really it was a system. They would get their drugs and on the street, and it's a whole system, and I don't want to go off on a tangent. But anyways, these guys were cellies. I was in this building for maybe, I don't know, 3.5 years, 4 years. And these guys were cellies. So if you're a cellie with somebody, you're living with that guy for, these guys were at least together. I was there for at least 2.5 years. So you get close to that person, right? And so anyways, this guy was told, you need to take your cellie out. And he did. He stabbed him. And it wasn't personal.
So it'd be like me and you taking me out.
Exactly. Isn't that crazy? And I'm going mad after I stab you. And let's say I don't kill you. I don't stab you. It was business. I was told to do it. Isn't that crazy? And nothing personal, Matt. Nothing personal.
I like you a lot. Just had to.
No, I love you, dude. But that was what I was told to do. That was business. It's like The Godfather. You see him where he gets his own brother and he puts the gun on him and he's like, he's crying and he shoots him. I'm not for that. I don't think that's okay. That's to an extent that's way beyond. Like, I don't think that's okay.
Are you trying to say you're not okay with stabbing people, Marty? I don't imagine.
What I'm saying is I don't make it personal. If that makes sense. I don't take it to the extreme to where I'm not stabbing you, Matt. Nobody owns me. If that makes sense. Nobody's telling me to stab Matt. I'm not doing it. They can take my life. it's a business for them. So in their business world, that's how they promote and move up. If that makes sense.
Sure.
But they're kind
And their
of
lives are likely on the line as well. If
If they don't do it, they can
it's
be
like,
killed.
hey, look, one of us is going to die. One of us is going to get stabbed. It's either going to
and that has
be
to
me
be
or you.
That has to be your principle. For me, I'd be like, you know what? I'm not doing it. Take me out. Whatever. But you have to have what
Marty, you'd never survive in prison.
Oh, they'd isolate me because I'm stabbing the first person I get, and I'd say, "You need to put me on. You need to put me on PC and
gosh.
isolate me." No, that sounds crazy, but I would be like, okay, right? I'm going out in a blaze of glory, but yeah, no, I probably could survive in prison actually because I've been there so long. I spent 14 years in prison.
You're like, Steve, what's up, man? Like, Marty,
No, I know.
didn't expect to see you back so soon.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm completely lost track.
You were saying there was a guy who they were cellies and one guy.
Oh no, but so in my job and what I've taken it to is I don't think things personally within the work. Like I never have taken anything personally. Like when I'm getting these guys, some of them, like I said, the hard thing I have is with the child molesters or rapist. That's a hard one because I do take that personal. I can't get over somebody hurting children. So that's a different level. And I can't lie to you. I do take that personal. I'm just going to be honest, right? I got to tell you. But if you're a bank robber and you're a gangbanger and you're this and that, that's your profession. I don't think it's good for society. You need to go to jail. I'm good at what I do. And
You got to cut the hand.
I'm going to hunt you down and I'm going to put you in jail. But I don't take it personal. It's not personal. Matter of fact, I talk to the guys like I was telling you. I talk to them like how we're talking. Once the game's over and they're going to custody, it's done. I mean, I'm not. And sometimes they get away with me. I didn't catch them all. I mean, some they'd hit roofs and I'd catch them maybe a couple years later. And I'd tell them there was one guy. So get this. This is a good story. I had one guy. We were sitting on this hotel and we're like, hey, we were getting information. Disgruntled girlfriends are always the best. The guy cheats on the girl and the girl's like, I'm going to get him. So she'll contact us and go, I know where he's at. I know he's on the run and he's over here doing this. And that's just the best. She'll do all our work for us because she hates the guy because he's cheating on her and whatever. Anyway, so anyway, she's like, he's over in this motel and this and that, blah, blah, blah. And so we got pictures of the guys because some of them we haven't seen all of them. Some of them we got pictures and we got pictures of them robbing places and this and that. We're looking at the pictures and we're like, okay. And so we got where he's at. So we're sitting on there. And it's just me and this other guy. And this is kind of like, Wild West, right? You should have a lot of people, but it doesn't always. Sometimes the Wild West is just me and another guy, and we're out there in the hood, just doing what we do. It really is like that. It really is the Wild West. So me and him are out there, and our boss expects us to get these arrests and get these stats, and so we sit on the house, and two guys come out, and we're looking at the picture, and I grab both of them. I grab a hold of both of them, and I say. And so you just want to deal with one guy, right? Because there's only two of us. And I look at my partner and I go, which one is it? Because it's actually on his case, he got the picture and he goes, it's that guy. So I turn and look at the one guy. I go, get the fuck out of here. And we arrest the one guy. So we arrest him, pat him down, and he doesn't have any ID on him. And we're asking him his name and he's telling us this and that. So we actually had to call one of the county guys. One of the deputies comes on over and he's got a thumb printer. So he comes over and runs the guy and it's not our guy. Anyways, we let the guy go who was our guy.
No.
Because they looked a lot alike and we messed up. And so anyways, we ended up getting the guy a couple years later and he had 3 guns. We got him in another place. We came down. We got him and he tried to throw a gun out the back and then he comes out and we drew down on him and he had 2 guns, 1 gun on him and he had another gun in the apartment building. Anyways, long story short, he got away from us. He got the good on him. It's just part of the game. You don't win them all. But he remembered. He laughed. We told him. We said, "Hey, you remember that one time we got you? We let you go." He laughed. He thought it was funny. He goes, "Yeah, I can believe you guys let me go." Right? So I was like, it happens. I shouldn't be saying this on the radio, right? I'm drunk. I'm letting everybody know. But so sometimes you look like a hero, and then sometimes you
look like a
fool. The bad guy. Yeah, you look like a fool, and the bad guy gets a great story. You imagine when he went and told his buddies. He goes, "Yeah, they had me. They told me to get out. They tried to arrest my cousin. He has no record, so." Well.
Oh my God! I cheated on an astronomy test once a project in college. So, what we were supposed to do is take pictures, draw representations of the phases of the moon. So every week we were supposed to go out and look at the moon and see where it was, or every few days and write it down. And we were supposed to have like 8, 9, 10 weeks worth of data. Well, Of course, Matt doesn't do that. And we're supposed to be bringing in our pictures every single week. And they keep telling us in class every week, they're like, listen, do not bring these pictures in week 13, because the semester is 15 weeks. And this was a semester project. They're like, you need to bring these in every single week so your person can be looking at them every single week.
Right.
And of course, I was a freshman in college. I struggled. I struggled for like the first year and a half of college, and then I crushed after that. But the point is, I get to week like 14, and I'm thinking to myself, if I don't get this work in, then it's going to be game over. Like, there's no way I can actually pass this class. So what I do is, I feel terrible about this, but I take 2 pieces of paper. I write the first 3 weeks, because I get my friends' phases of the moon, right? Because they were working on the project too. I get the first 3 weeks, and I draw them on a piece of paper in a red pen, and then I step on the pen, or excuse me, I step on the paper. So I have this paper, red ink, step on it, smudge it, curl it around a little bit. Then I get another piece of paper and draw like another 5 phases of the moon, and I take them all in. I take him in and I take him to the guy. And he's like, all right, let me pull up your file here. It's like week 14. I swear to God. And this guy's like, what are you doing? I was like, listen. Here's the deal. I recorded the first 3 or 4 phases, and I lost the paper. You can see it had been stepped on and put under my bed. Like, it was under my laundry.
You worked harder at getting by.
I didn't listen to me.
I used to do the same thing. That's so sad.
I was like, I didn't want to bring in these last 5 phases and then magically appear with the first 4 phases later on, because you would have known I was lying. So I was trying to find the thing, and then I realized I finally did my laundry and I found it. And he laughed. He was like, well, I guess, I mean, you'd have to be really good at cheating, because that's a really good story. I was like, I know. It's kind of like, I think back on it, and it was like, that for me at 18, that was the game. I was just playing the game. And there was no animosity between me and that guy.
No. And he may have known. He may have known.
But
he's like, you know what?
A professor actually told me that exact thing, because I came up with this big excuse. I think the same week, I had missed this exam, and I was like, well, look, we met with a librarian, and this is back in 2000, right? So Hotmail and email in general were really difficult things to pin down, right? Hotmail was not very reliable, and I had a Hotmail account, and that's, by the way, for those of you listening, Hotmail was an email account, not what you think. It was MAIL. The point is, I had a Hotmail account. I was like, well, professor, I emailed you, but the email apparently didn't go through when I had to miss this exam. And, the librarian who talked to us about internet navigation said that some emails are not reliable. And he was like, oh, you're playing the game. The guy just nailed me. Derek Van Reenen. He's still a cow, but he knew. He was like, listen, you got me. Because I remember the librarian saying this, and you're now using that excuse. He's like, you got me, but you're playing a game, and I know you're playing a game. And I was like, thank you, sir.
But you had gained his respect. Am I wrong?
In a really poor way.
In a poor way. But yes. So that's something within prison and in the hood. Respect is everything. It may sound weird. Remember we were talking about
I definitely did gain his respect in a sense that he recognized that I had paid attention to everything, and I was able to take all of the information that semester and weave it into a way that worked for me.
He didn't like it. It wasn't the ideal
I'm not
way,
happy about this, but I get where you're coming from. I see it's just business. That's essentially what he was just saying.
So the huge thing is respect. And I guess we were hitting on that earlier when we were talking about the Greeks, the Iliad and the Odyssey, that it was
manners.
It wasn't respect, but it was manners or hospitality. And so respect is the hugest thing within prison. Respect, or in the hood. So if you disrespect somebody, it's kind of weird. That was what. So I grew up in I don't know if you grew up in a bad neighborhood. I grew up in a really bad neighborhood, and then being in the prison system and law enforcement, respect is everything. It's kind of a weird thing, but if you disrespect somebody, that's going to get you killed. Because that's personal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Nothing's personal, but when you disrespect somebody,
the function, the action, the overall action is business. But the little nuance, the stank you put on the bad action, that's personal.
That's personal. And that was the hugest thing that would get somebody killed in prison or in the hood or anything like that. It was all about respect. if you did something, it was almost an honor thing. Like if you did some, so I worked in the prison.
Well, honor, if I may, and again, I've never worked in the prison system, but it's my understanding, and I did not grow up in a great area, but it's my understanding that it's kind of like, look, the honor, the disrespect thing. If you allow somebody to disrespect you, then it allows a whole slew of other things. So it comes down to, it's kind of like the pin in a grenade. The pin is tiny and it's almost meaningless, but it allows for this much greater chain of reactions that could end up killing you.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, look, the honor is the bellwether, right?
Yes.
The honor.
No, you're right. So for instance, with it was that when I started in the prison system, and I was fortunate because, like you, we can fight, right? So that was kind of a bonus for me. But that wasn't really the important thing. We would actually fight. Like if you had a problem with an inmate, you'd take it to classification and you'd fight the guy. Sounds crazy, right? It's barbaric.
Wait, back up. So you're like 30 years old.
Yeah, my 20s, the early 30s, 20s, yeah.
And
yeah.
you're a world-class MMA fighter. Because
well, this was some of that time, yes, but some of this was even prior to that.
Hang on.
But yes,
let me just put this together. So you're like a 30-year-old tank working in the prison system, and if you had a problem with an inmate and he had a problem with you, instead of shanking each other or setting something up, you'd go out into the yard.
Yes.
You'd take your sidearm off.
Yes.
Say, here we go.
Yeah. You'd settle it. It was almost honest and kind of take me out of the equation. But yes, I was in this, and even me. So, for instance, if I had a guy,
have you ever seen the film End of Watch?
Yes.
There's a scene.
Yes. No, I know. Yes,
there's a scene in that film.
It's true.
There's a scene in that film
It's
where
real.
the two officers.
That's old school. That's not now.
But hang on. There's a scene in the film, just for those who haven't seen it. There's a scene in the film where these two L.A. police officers pull up they get called in, and this guy's giving them a really hard time. He's not listening to him, and he's talking all kinds of trash, and he's saying, I could beat you up without this belt. And one of the officers, the one you obviously love in the film, he's like, oh yeah? And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, takes off his belt, takes off his badge. He's like, all right, let's go. And they beat the hell out of each other. The officer ends up winning, right? Puts the belt back on, and you see that character later in the movie, and he says, you showed me love because you booked me on some minor offense.
Yes.
You didn't book me on, like assaulting police officer. You had that respect that you were able to take the belt off and settle it in an honest manner. And
yes.
you gained respect in that manner.
You hit the nail on the head. And so it doesn't matter in the hood or in the prisons. Doesn't matter whether you win. Doesn't matter. Nobody gives a crap. Matters that you stepped up. So in the movie, of course, the cop wins because he's the hero, right? Wouldn't have mattered. They could kind of beat the shit out of him.
That cop dies in the movie.
He does die at the end. No, yeah, but the scene you're talking about, he doesn't. He wins.
Yes,
but,
of course.
But what I'm saying is it never matters in the hood or in the prison. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose. You just got to step up to the plate.
You have to fight for
yourself. But you've gained that respect, if that makes sense. That guy, he gained that guy's respect. Matter of fact, that's why he told him. He goes, I don't know if you remember.
You showed me love.
He rolled up to him.
He became kind of an informant.
If you remember, yeah, he did. He told him. He said, "Hey, I don't use this, but he had respect." He goes, "These guys are doing this." He didn't listen to him because I think that's what got him killed. But he gave him a heads up.
He said, "Listen. There's some people that are looking out. There's some problems. I mean, there's money on your head." I think he's told him, and he's like, "There's always money on my head."
Right, and he was young, right?
Yeah,
right. But and believe me, I've listened to crooks. I've had a lot of them help me out and tell me a lot of stuff. So, but the respect is there, and it really is. It is there, and it works. It's a two-way street, and so I've had guys that once you get that respect, I look at. So I've had guys that have done things that are a little bit crooked, but because they have the respect, and I'm not talking raping anybody or killing anybody, but I'm talking minor things that they could have went away for. Let it go because they gave me something or respected me with something, or maybe saved my life with something. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes sense.
It's a weird dichotomy, and it's kind of a movie thing, but it's real. So anytime we do entertainment, it's a reflection of reality, if that makes sense. Like it's a reflection of what's real. So a lot of these things are real.
Could I ask you something? I've never been in a real fight. All right, and I know that sounds odd because I've done a whole lot of jiu-jitsu fights, and I fancy myself a reasonable fighter, but I've never been in a fight where there's no ref, right? How do you know when the fight's over? Like if you're fighting some inmate in the yard, you're 20 years younger.
Can I give you some stories?
Yes.
So here's a story, and so so anyway, so Corcoran, I'm going to give you a couple stories. These stories just lead
I got
into-
time, baby.
Okay,
I got time.
so one of the things that Corcoran got in huge trouble, and people might have remembered who maybe I'm trying to think 15 years ago or whatever. Corcoran got in big trouble because they were saying they were betting on the inmates when they were fighting.
Okay,
They called it
yeah.
gladiator school, and it was a big
Sure.
thing. It came out on the news and the newspapers.
I remember this. I remember that.
Good,
Yes.
good.
Yes.
Well, so if you work in the prison system, what you do and what they did wrong, what those correctional officers did wrong, or those guards, is they were betting. That was stupid. Okay.
They were using it as entertainment.
No, but you got to understand legally, and this is what people don't understand. When you go around, so you've got people in the ADSEG, which is the jail within the prison. These guys have done something in the prison to get themselves in trouble, and they've got to go to jail in the prison. So they're isolated. But what you do is you put them into integrated yard before you release them back into general population, right? So this is going to be another weird thing, but within the ADSEG unit, which is the lockup unit or the jail within the prison, there's different rules. So I'll see a guy in the lockup unit. He is supposed to stab me in the lockup unit. But if I see him on the main line outside the lockup unit, I'll talk to him and we'll be buddies.
And you're good.
We're good. But I know inside that lockup unit, he's got to stab me because that's the rules there. So we understand the rules.
There's a different business.
Different business. And we all understand it. It's just kind of funny because I had a hard time sometimes coming into places like Danville or places in the business world because I didn't understand the rules. Sometimes they're kind of shady and you get stabbed in the back. At least these are pretty clear rules. At least I understood them. Like I didn't always understand when somebody would play like they were your friend and stab you in the back. Not literally, but figuratively. I'm like, wait a minute. I thought this was, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like this is pretty honest. It's like you knew the rules. So that was anyways, that's kind of just sharing a little bit with my own experience. But so anyways, what we have to do is you got to let them into integrated yard, which means, let's say you're the Black Guerrilla family, which is a gang for the blacks, or you're a Mexican mafia, a gang or you're a Nazi lowrider, which is a white gang, or whatever. You're a Norteño.
Is there a gang for just like an average European descent male who's not, a Nazi? And
it's funny.
He's like a hockey player. He's like a very vanilla, middle-sized
it sounds
white
funny,
guy.
but there really isn't. And so most of the people that are like, they have Aryan Brotherhood. Most of them, so if you're white, you're probably going to get stuck in one of those. Doesn't mean
you're going to get stuck.
Well, you're going
to get segregated.
Well, you're Hispanic, and I am.
Yeah,
too.
but I don't look Hispanic.
I don't either, but I'm half Hispanic.
Look at you.
But I would go with the Southern Mexicans, and I was in. So like a lot of my family, this is another funny story. So some of the people Armendariz is a Mexican name, and so some of my family down in L.A. were in there. So when they came in, they saw my name. They go, Armendariz, that's my people. And I remember seeing the guy in the cell. I go, what are you talking about, my people? He goes, no. And it was, we were cousins.
You saw a guy in prison? You were cousins?
He was doing life. He did a drive-by and killed some people. Oh, no, he did. He called me out.
Wait.
He goes,
you were actually related.
We were related. So I walked by his
guy.
cell, and he calls me over, and he goes, hey, and he's a Sereno, part of the Mexican mafia. And he goes, hey, Armendariz. He goes, that's my people. And so there's a lot of Armendarizes out there. Mexicans have big families, right? Catholics, big families. So I'm thinking, okay, right. Okay. Because I've had other people with Armendariz, and, it didn't, he goes, all right. He started naming names, and yeah.
You're like, that's my Aunt Helen.
No, it was. Exactly. No, it was. Nail on the head. But the weird thing was, so whenever you have something like that, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to say, hey, listen, this is a family member. And so this is what you have to think. And this is business, right? This is another business thing. We've gone off on so many tangents, but hopefully this is interesting to somebody.
Listen, don't you worry about that.
Okay, so this is the way I looked at it. I looked at him, and he was family, right? But I thought
literally, he's family.
Literally family. So what you have to know is, am I willing to do my job? So for instance, I was put in a situation, would I kill him? And if he was put in a situation, would he kill me? And the answer was yes. So we were okay. Sounds bizarre, right? I had nothing against the guy. He was a good kid. I actually told him, I actually shared with him some of the things that the family was going. My grandfather, who lived to be 100, actually passed away. And I actually came in and I told him, I went to the funeral, I went and talked to him and stuff. But as long as that's known, it's not a conflict of interest, if that makes sense. Now, if it was, what I would have to do, let's say, for instance, I thought it would be a conflict where I couldn't do my job, then I would have to go and say, listen, you need to move me off that yard or get me somewhere else because this is a conflict of interest. But it wasn't. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense.
It wasn't because I didn't dislike the guy, but if business had to be done, I knew he would kill me, and if I had to kill him, not that we wanted to, but if that had to be the rules, then we would. So then it was okay. Sounds crazy.
That's so tremendous. The way you're explaining this, it makes perfect sense to me.
It's honest. In some ways, it is so honest. And I'm not saying it's right, but it's just, it is what, it's like so black and white, right? I mean, it's, everybody can figure it out. It's just, it is what it is.
Try this one on for size. I was talking to my students today about one of my students was talking about how she worked with a different tutoring company. And it was a real issue, right? Because the tutoring company was not great. And I said, well, look, here's the deal. Okay, I don't advertise, and because of that, I'm not going to be able to stop people like you from working with this other tutoring company in the future. And that's a huge issue because, again, these other companies, they call people, they harass people, they email them, they have all these ways of gaining clients. Okay, so I was telling her, I was like, look, the problem is, for me too, she was essentially saying, how come you couldn't have helped me avoid working with this other company? Right? She's like, look, I worked with this company. It didn't work out well. If I had just come to you first, it would have been better. And I said, well, the problem is I will never do what they do because of the exact thing that you were just kind of saying. It's not, to me, it's not an honest kind of exchange.
Yes.
There are other tutoring companies in the area that literally pay students to refer their friends. So like, you're a student. I'm like, hey, Marty, I'll pay you $100 if you refer me a friend. Every friend you refer me, I'll pay you $100.
Right.
So it becomes this very dishonest exchange. And I can't participate in that. It's just not something that I can get behind. And because of that, you're going to have a certain number of students going to these other companies. But again, like you were saying, I don't care because it's honest. If one of my students refers one of their friends, they know there is zero ulterior motive. They're not getting paid. They're not getting any benefit by referring them, other than saying, "Hey, I worked with this guy and I really liked him." And that's important.
I like it. To me too. I like honesty. In I don't know. It's kind of like honesty, integrity.
Yes.
Like it's a weird. Maybe I mean, I'd hate to think that it's like a fairy tale, but I really feel it. I really feel honesty and integrity and being a person of your word. These are important things to me. Like, I think it's an important standard. Obviously, it is to you because that's what you just said.
Yes.
And we have. So I don't know. I don't know if that's something that's taught. Is it something that's innate? Does it vary? Is it both? You know, it goes back to the same question because. So, for instance, if we have and I don't know if we mentioned this before, but if we mentioned if somebody has $100. And let's say me and you have I given $100, but I got to give you a certain amount of money.
Sure.
If you say no, if you don't agree to it, neither one of us get any money, right? So I'm sitting here, I got $100. I'm thinking, you know what? If I give him 40, that's $40 that he would never have. Would he be okay with that? And you might be, right? But if I go, I'm just going to give him $5, you'd be like, screw him. But that's $5 you wouldn't have.
Let's back up on this.
Okay.
The psychological experiment, I think I know what you're talking about, which is, hey, look, I can either keep, Matt, can either keep the $100 and I only get it once. Okay, so I get $100, but I only get it once. Or I can offer Marty a certain amount of money. Say I offer you $40 and I keep $60. If you accept it, there's another $100 on the table for me.
That's a little bit different, but that's the same concept. It's just a little more complex.
Explain the experiment because I'm pretty familiar.
It's pretty much the same thing, but it's a little more complex because it's tiered. So there's only $100 on the table, right?
Okay.
So
and you get
but you have to agree to. Yes, I have to give you a certain amount of money. But if you say no, then neither one of us get any money.
Okay,
so it's
so-
the same concept. It's
So I
exactly
have
the same.
$100,
Right.
and I have to say, hey, look, Marty, how about you take 10,
And I go,
and I take
fuck
90.
you, Matt.
And then
That is so unfair.
neither of us get the money.
Neither of us get the money. But
So
we
if I
do.
say
We have a
50-50.
concept. I'm like, cool. Or even maybe 40, 60. I might go, he's getting 60, but okay. That's not too unfair.
So there is
Right, but there is a concept of
there
fair.
is a correct
And they've
answer
done,
here.
Yes,
right?
and they've done that experiment, and that shows that there is some ideal of fairness.
Right.
Because if it could be $5 that I wouldn't have $5, but I'm like, no way. I'd rather
Yeah.
not have the $5 because it's just not fair.
But it's my understanding that the correct answer to that is to always accept any amount of money that you get.
It would make
Because
sense, right? Because
the
it's
correct-
$5 you would not have.
The correct answer is everybody wins. There's a resource that's then unleashed between the two parties that is always superior to the resources they had prior.
Right. But the thing is, we have a concept of fairness.
Right.
And we don't like if we're looking at it as you being selfish and being unfair. We would rather take the loss because of that concept of fairness.
So
You're
we're-
right. The right
we're
answer would
paying
be
money.
we're getting money. We're both getting money that we did. It's just extra money. We should say yes to anything, right? But we have a concept of fairness.
Well, doesn't that come back to your concept of honor and respect?
Yes, it does.
Like if you disrespect me and say you better take the $5 and I'm taking 95, that's a very risky proposition for
disrespecting
me,
me.
in a social setting.
Because I'm worth at least maybe 40 or 30 at least, right?
Or why aren't I worth the same as you?
Oh, you could go that far. You could. It depends on the individual.
Right. But
so we do have a concept of that.
there's a very delicate and dangerous sense of social standards.
And I don't know if that's is that taught? Is that innate? I don't know. But I think it's there. And maybe at varying levels.
I've been joking around with my students recently about this concept of people trying to get them to do things based on the person's perceived sense that the students have something to lose. Let me be very clear on this, okay? So my student could be in this situation with a friend, okay? Whatever the situation is, and the friend is saying you have to do this or else. Now the friend is trying to manipulate my student's behavior. They're trying to manipulate how they function in the world with another friend or with an adult or with whatever. But they're doing it saying, hey, you better do this or else. Now, if somebody's attempting to do that, they're like, hey, take it easy with that cup here. You're killing me on the mic here. It's okay. The point is, I joke around with my students because I say, at this point in my life, if somebody says, you better do this or else, what they're saying is, I know your life and the consequences of your life far better than you do, and you better listen to what I have to say. And I joke around with them because in my point in my life, I'm like, burn the whole place down.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, you think you know me best? Let's find out.
Yeah.
Let's find out. Because so frequently, instead of appealing to people's, hey, look, if you do this, this is going to happen, it has nothing to do with me. These are just the honest pieces on the table. Very frequently, people don't talk that straight to younger people. To like a 16, 17-year-old doesn't hear hey, look, you're going to do whatever you want. I just want you to know if you do A, this happens. If you do B, this happens. If you do C, this happens. And it's such an odd thing because they say, hey, you have to do this.
So I'm wondering, and I really don't know. I don't know if that's... So I would perceive us, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just would like to perceive us this way, or at least myself. But I perceive us as somewhat of a little bit of the alphas, if that makes sense.
Or you're saying us. You're saying
Me and you. Right.
Oh.
So
I appreciate being on the same page here with you. But
no, absolutely. But I don't know if that's universal. And so in different circumstances, I don't know if I would be an alpha. Like in certain circumstances, I think I would be. So I can't say it's everything, right? There may be some weak points where I'd be like, oh God, I got a cave on this one. But in those things, the way you made that out, we'd be like, no, I'd rather die on my feet. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees.
That's right. That's a line from Ocean's 13, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think they were the first ones to say that, but okay. But I don't think so. Oh gosh, I think most people in forgive me, but I think most people are sheep. I think most people, and maybe in certain circumstances, if I'm being honest, maybe in certain circumstances, I would be too. So, you know what I'm saying? Like and maybe it's the drip that gets us. Like, for instance, if you come up and put a gun to my head and said, you need to disvalue your most important things in life, I'd be like, fuck you, shoot me, right? But that's
But
one
you have the frog in the pot.
Yes.
You have
so
this slow
if you do it
manipulation.
slowly, let's say, and we always use like Nazi Germany is so easy, but if you start imposing things and you want to speak up, you're the guy that goes, no, fuck you. And then all of a sudden, a knock on the door at 3:30 in the morning and you disappear, your whole family disappears. Then it makes it a little bit harder for the next guy to go, fuck you, because 3:30 in the morning, right? It's a slow process. But I think most of society, and I don't think I don't know, I think by world history, most are sheep. And maybe we all are, maybe we can be sheepdogs in certain circumstances, but maybe in some circumstances we're all a little bit sheep. I don't know. It's just, I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know.
No, I think you're very right. And look, I think in some aspects of my life, I would take the compliment that you gave me and say, yeah, hey, look, I'm an alpha. But in a lot of aspects of my life, I have a wife, I have 3 boys. If you told me, hey, Matt, if you stand up and stick your chest out, somebody's going to show up on your door at 3 a.m. and your boys are going to disappear, I'm going to shut the hell up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything, right? But I don't think that's necessarily a mark on me or my character. I think they're all the same. I think they're all the same part. I'm looking out for my family. I'm not even looking out for me in that case, right? When you start talking about, when I'm talking about people giving you a hard time or trying to manipulate you, I remember being a teenager and having people say, "Hey, you better do this," or "Hey, you better do that." And even in my adult life, people would say, "Hey, you gotta," like, nobody took my profession seriously through my 20s. I've been a tutor and a teacher now for 17 years. That's a long time, right? Like, I'm good at what I do. I believe in what I do. I love what I do. I'm helping the world in a very tiny, tiny way, but I believe I'm moving the needle. Okay, my point is that at some point, I had to stop listening to people say, hey, you better do this or else, or you better stop doing this or else. And I was just, hey, burn it all down then, because I'm not stopping tutoring.
Yes.
I'm not stopping believing in what I'm doing.
So that to me is equivalent to me going, and I mean this 100%. So that's equivalent to me going to when I go to my job. I've got 9 days left.
9 days.
I'm okay with it.
You're in single digits.
Single
Marty.
digits, and I'm good with that. And I'm not planning on going out and taking any chances. God forbid. But that's equivalent when every time I go out, especially when I was doing real crazy stuff, that I'm like, hey, if this is my last day, this is what I signed up for. I agreed to this. That's the contract, and that's the same thing you're saying. But I gotta admit, like, so for instance, when I talk to my family, my wife's family, who deals with stocks and bonds and money and has way more than I deal with, I shut up. I don't know what they're talking about. Does it make sense? Like, I become a sheep because they're out of my world. And so they're talking about this and that. And they kind of exclude me because they know that he doesn't really know. He doesn't have that capability.
He's not interested.
No, it's not even that.
I don't think
It's
it's
not
fair
even
to
that.
say.
It's-
I don't think it's fair to say you don't have that capability.
Well,
I think
okay,
we
but
started this off by talking about satellites and relativity.
Okay.
I mean, I think you could learn stocks.
Yes, but I'm not in that world, if that makes sense. Like,
Yes.
I just don't
Yes.
have the capacity, whether
You don't
monetarily,
know,
whatever.
listen,
I just don't have it.
You don't know Aikido. That's fine.
Yes.
You know Jiu Jitsu just
So
fine.
I have to admit, and I'm being honest, that in that world, I'm a sheep. I don't know, right? I hate to admit that because nobody wants to be a sheep, but in that world, that would be me being the sheep.
If it makes you
and
feel
I can
any
sound
better.
really cool and say, hey, and I mean this, but in my world, it's easy for me to go, I'll take a bullet, but I've been trained and made that way. Like, I don't even know if I can take credit for that. That's just the mold that I've made. But if you put me in another circumstance, I'm a sheep. So if you put somebody in my world that, like, is not used to the bullets and the violence, they become sheep. but is that fair? It's kind of what they've been circumstanced for. I don't know.
Well, look, you were talking earlier about having people being able to take responsibility for. It's like the hand. The hand has got gangrene. You got to cut the hand off. And I was listening to you talk about this, and there's always the argument that it's like, hey, look, we in a Western culture have to, in a culture that's founded on essentially the ancient principles and ancient philosophy, if we decouple the concept of free will from the individual and we put it all on the circumstances, right? Nature versus nurture. If we say, hey, look, you take any human being and you abuse them and you treat them poorly and you give them poor food and you put them in houses with lead paint and you do all of these things, that person, 99% chance, is going to be a violent criminal. Okay, let's just say that. Can we blame that person then? Are we going to lock up that person? And
can I say yes and yes?
You can, because that's the horrendous nature of childhood and vulnerability.
Yes.
That look, it's not the 4-year-old's fault that he was born to this horrendous family.
So I thought of you're right. No, I thought of the principle of the death penalty because I worked on death row, right? And I actually am okay with the death penalty. Not surprising, right? Because I'm coming from a violent background, but I'm actually okay with it, and I'll tell you why. So if I did something deserving of the death penalty, or even if you said Matt, you said Marty, we got to kill you right now, because
Jesus, that's dark.
It is, but I had to think about this because
Abraham, Joseph, whatever you want me to say.
Maybe. Well, now you're even going beyond that because now you're going to something even higher than myself, and that that actually for me would be the easy button. But if you're just saying me, I would sit there and go, yeah, I think for the better good of society. Even if you said we got to smoke you because these people that have done horrendous things to society the hand needs to be cut off. I'd be like, yeah, it's got to be done. That's how strongly I feel about it. So, for instance, I know, but I'm okay with people who disagree with the death penalty. But mostly the ones I have more respect for is somebody who had maybe their sister killed or their child killed, and they go, you know what? I don't believe this is okay. I respect that because they have lived it. If that makes sense.
Yes.
And that I'm okay with. I mean, I disagree with it wholeheartedly, but I'm like, I'll stand behind that person because they've walked the walk or talked the talk. But if you're just going, oh, I'm against it, and I'm like, okay, if you had somebody that you care about, if your child been killed and you're still against it, like it's easy to say, but would you be okay with it if it hit home? And if you're still okay with it, then I'm like, okay, I respect that. It's just like the whole thing where it doesn't matter if you win or lose in that fight. You just stepped up to it. You're willing to put it all out there. What it was the Greek said, I'm willing to get naked before the gods. I'm willing to put it all out there. Yeah, in that case, I can totally respect it. I may not even agree with it, but I respect it.
You know what's interesting about that? Just tonight, I was talking to my students about why I liked athletics. And it came down to, easy with that cup.
I'm okay. What's you say? Athletics?
No, athletics.
Athletics. Got it.
Swimming.
Yes.
Yes. High school swimming. I had a couple swimmers in here. I was like, I swam in high school.
And there's really good swimmers around this area, by the way.
There are.
There are.
But what was amazing is I said, look, here's the deal. Swimming in high school to me allowed me to bear myself. I bared it all. I was everything I could possibly be. And for better or for worse. And I won or I lost based on everything I had to give. And you can't... There's an experience when you go through that. When you bear yourself wholly.
Yes.
You give everything you have in your soul. Like you are... There is no pretense. This is it.
Naked before the gods. Everything is revealed.
There is an experience as a human being that you get. You find out things about yourself, who you are. If you broke, I told them about this time. I was 18. I was rowing. It was almost exactly this time. 20 years ago. I was 18 years old. I'm 38 now. Literally 20 years ago.
Man.
December December 2nd, it was, I think, the last practice of my freshman year before winter break. And we were rowing these 4-man boats, and there were 4 4-man boats. There were 16 of us, and we were rowing, and my boat was crushing. And it was me and this other guy, Dan Carlson, that were just going hard. We were in the same boat, and the oar I was pulling on was red because my hands, the skin on my hands had pulled off, and I was bleeding, right? And I had a bloody nose. Now, mind you, I'm rowing in a boat. So imagine how hard you would have to be pulling on something to get a bloody nose in a boat. And I remember it to this day. We crushed that day.
Yeah.
And it was one of those experiences where I
gave
gave everything.
the last time I was on there, I said it's beautiful. That is a beautiful moment. It's so pure.
It's
who
I was.
It's honest.
It's who I was.
For that moment, everything was focused. You stepped outside of yourself, and that moment was happening.
But you know what's
so real?
What the thing I took away from that is I found out things about myself that day that I obviously remember 20 years later. I was 18. I'm 38 now. That's over half of my life ago.
It'll stay with you forever.
I reference myself on that day.
So
with
this
my
is something
bloody oar.
I wonder what, and I want your opinion on this because you're at least I know in Jiu Jitsu, and I'm sure in rowing, a top athlete. But so when I get people, and we were talking about like what I would like to do, like as far as teaching and things like that, I don't like. I've known tons of world champions, like tons, in wrestling and fighting, and I've known top athletes in the stuff that I love. But when I teach, I don't. How do I put it? So I was teaching Monte Vista High School, and I remember there was this kid. And he was the best wrestler there. Like he was winning most of his matches. He wasn't a state champion caliber, but he was like, he was like winning 40 matches, and he only had like maybe 6 losses in a season, which is pretty good, right?
Pretty damn good.
Pretty damn good. But he came up to me and he was missing practice, and he was doing this and doing that. And I came up to him, and of course, all the coaches and the school, they like, let this kid do what he wants. He's awesome. He came up to me. I said, "No." I go, "Listen, if you miss another practice, you do that. You're not wrestling. You're not going to be in this program, and I don't care." And he came up to me. He looked really confused. And I go, "Listen." I don't care about that. I know world champions. I know some of the best guys in the world. I go, if you're not doing your best, which was what you're talking about, if you're not giving it your all, I don't care. So in saying that, and the reason I like teaching jiu-jitsu, it doesn't matter, like one of the students I've got right now is an older woman, and I've had kids, and I have this. My thing is not so much, if you're a world champion, that's awesome, right? Isn't that right? Win your world championship, win 5 world championships.
So great, you're
awesome.
Great.
But I'm just as proud of you if you give it your all, and maybe your biggest thing is maybe taking 3rd place. I think that's wonderful. Because you gave it your all, and you reached your potential. Your hands were bleeding on the oar. Does that make sense? To me, that makes me, and maybe this is like the romantic part of me. Maybe I'm a romanticist, but to me, if I see a kid give that, and his best was 3rd place, not even that big of a tournament, but he gave it all, blood on the oars, and that was all he had. I feel that in my heart, and I feel like that's just a wonderful thing. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's crazy. Maybe I'm over romanticizing. Maybe I'm one of these guys that like to read Charles Dickens books and like things like that. Maybe I'm crazy, but to me, that's it. That's it. That's wonderful. And don't get me wrong. I'm happy if I get that world champion and he wins 5 world champions. That's awesome. But that's what I want.
Marty, I don't even know what to say. God bless you, man. Listen, we've been talking for an hour 45 minutes. I gotta let you go home.
This was good. I totally enjoyed it. Had a great time. Thank you, Matt.
I really want to thank you for what you've done to keep California safe and the world safe. And you and I have known each other for a long time, and I want to say thank you for keeping me safe, training jiu-jitsu. There are a lot of times when you could have hurt me when I was a lower belt, and you never did.
In saying that, Matt, and I mean this, and you're the type of person you are, because you give on and you show that love and you pass it on to other people. And especially lately, I've seen that. It's been my pleasure. Oh my gosh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
You're the best, man. You're the best. Thanks, everybody.